We are live. So you'll have to excuse me. I was sick last week. I had the flu, and now I'm just the lingering cough that does not want to go away. So I have a hot drink. Hopefully we'll be able to get through it with Hashem's help. I think there's a lot of energy of like weirdness and tension in the air. As a city, we've had a strange week, and as a nation, we are having a little bit of a mixed feelings at the moment. And when I chose this sikha to teach, I chose it. I got excited about it. It's a little bit of a more philosophical sikha. Sometimes the Rebbe doesn't always like go super philosophical in sikha, but there are a few that are like known to be like super philosophical sikhas. And I decided I was in that kind of mood, and I chose to teach it. And then like halfway through yesterday, I was like, oh, I'm going to abandon ship because this is a bit difficult, and maybe it's too philosophical. Maybe that's not what people want, especially right now, to like be thinking about ideas that are much bigger than ourselves, and that seem maybe a little bit beyond and not so accessible. But then I realized, and as I continued learning, and as I came to the end of the sikha, as the Rebbe always does, makes everything extremely, extremely practical. And I was like, what we're talking about over here, this philosophy, this is not just for the sake of like mental gymnastics. This is telling us literally our purpose for why we're here. And I think especially at times when things feel a little more unsettled, something that actually can be very grounding is focusing on why I'm here, like what my purpose is. What can I actually do here on earth? Why have I been put into this world? So there are so many things that can be happening, and at the same time, there's a reason for me being here. And that can just like focus us a little bit from amongst all the chaos and all the big things that are happening. I can focus on my world that I am building in my life. So we're going to attempt the philosophy a little bit in an attempt to understand what we build with every single thing that we do. With every single thing that we do, we are building a world, and we are partners with Hashem in building this world, and that's where the philosophy is going to lead us. So that's my long, lengthy introduction for today. We'll see if anything makes sense. So this week's parsha is Parsha Shemos, and we're introduced to the story of the Jewish people in last week. They started, they were down in Mitzrayim. Yaakov passes away, and in the beginning, their life in Mitzrayim is good. It's very pleasant, and then Paro tricks them into becoming his slaves. And it's an interesting form of slavery. Jews have been slaves other times as well. Many Jews were slaves during the times of the Romans. Slavery is something that has existed from going back to the beginning of time, where people did their unpaid labor. And often slaves would just be, your personal servant. But the interesting thing about the slavery of the Jews is that they were taken specifically to build the cities for Paro, the cities of Pisam and Ramses, the pyramids. And so their main job as slaves, their main pursuit as slaves, was in building. And it's emphasized that it wasn't just in building. The language that's used, we say this in the Haggadah, this is from the pasuk of in this week's parsha, it says, Vayimaru es chayeyem, and he made their lives bitter, ba'avayda kasha, with hard work, b'chaymar ubelevenim, with mortar and bricks, v'chal aveidasam basada, and all the work that they had to do in the fields, etc. Right? So the Jews were doing other work, but the main work and the work that is emphasized over and over is the fact that they were working b'chaymar ubelevenim, with mortar and bricks. And then it goes on to explain, so we know that when Parai wanted to make the work even harder for them, when Moshe Rabbeinu comes and says, let my people go, Parai says, no, I'm going to actually make the work harder for them. And the next level of making the work harder for them is not only do they need to build these cities, which is backbreaking labor, they need to actually create the bricks that they're going to use to build the cities. So they're not going to be receiving finished materials to build with. They actually have to create the bricks. And bricks are made, I'm not an expert at brick making at all, but from what I understand, is that you take some sort of like mortar, concrete, and then you form it and you put it through fire. And that hardens it into a brick. And that's that. So basically there was the brick factory and then taking the bricks to build these cities. So we know that every element in the Torah is extremely significant. Nothing is just told to us. Nothing is told to us for no reason. No detail is emphasized without having a lot of significance behind it. And specifically with this story, one of the 10 Pesukim that the Lubavitcher Rebbe was encouraged that the children should say them all the time, that everyone should know by heart. And the reason that he wanted these 10 Pesukim to be said all the time and repeated all the time is because these are basically the foundations of our observance. And one of the foundations of our observance is the pasuk, B'chol dar vadar chayav adam l'reis es atzmei ke'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. Every single day, a person needs to observe himself as if he left Egypt. So what that means is that the concept of leaving Mitzrayim and the concept of Mitzrayim is not something that happened in the past. The concept of leaving Mitzrayim is something that we live with every single day. Why is it that it's something that we live with every single day? Mitzrayim was the first galus, and it basically set the tone for the future exile. So the energy of Mitzrayim is the energy of exile. And what do we need to live with every day is that I need to view myself as if I am leaving Mitzrayim. I need to be constantly in this mindset of leaving exile. Mitzrayim represents limitations, boundaries, things that are separate and hidden from that hide godliness. And every day I'm supposed to be doing this outward motion of releasing myself from these boundaries, releasing myself from these limitations, releasing myself from the klipa that hides and conceals the godliness, and freeing myself from this. And in order to understand how we go about this, we can explore a little bit more what happened in Mitzrayim, right? So if we understand what Mitzrayim is, we have a better understanding of what it means to leave Mitzrayim and how we can translate that into our day-to-day observance. So this emphasis of what happened in Mitzrayim is this emphasis on creating bricks, needing to make the bricks, building with the bricks. So what is up with these bricks? What is the deal with needing to create the bricks? So there's something really, really fascinating. You wouldn't think about this, that this is what Paro's intention was, but the Rebbe explains to us that a lot of the evil characters in the Torah had actually a very deep understanding and like intuitive understanding of what's going on in the world. And we can learn a lot from how they wanted to pervert positivity into negativity. Yes?
The bricks have to do with building, and if we always see in the past, or even in the future now, architects have always made the monument, like the Getty Museum, which is used for probably for negativity. And another thing is you have to start out as an established architect to be with God, to be memorized
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we're going to definitely head in that direction. So basically, yeah, what Parai understood was that Hashem gave the Jewish people a job in this world. And our job is to build a home for Hashem in this world. The language that Hasidus uses is the language of Dira B'Tachtainim, which is a home in the lowest place. That God should be able to be comfortable in down here on earth, the same way that we know that Hashem is expressed up in heaven, that he will also be expressed down here on earth. And how is that accomplished? That is accomplished through the building of the Jewish people. We build a home for Hashem down here on earth. So every single thing that we do, it's like, of course, there's this song that we teach kids. We say, you know, and for every mitzvah that you do so carefully, Hashem adds a brick to the base of Mikdash. That's the visual of that every action that we do is like a brick. It's a stone that creates the home for Hashem. But it's more than just adding a brick to the base of Mikdash Shlishi. We're not talking about just like that future home. We're talking about here on earth, everything that we do. Our actions are not just actions. Our actions are actually vessels, right? A home is a vessel. A home is a place that something enters into. Our actions become vessels for energy. And there's two different directions that can go. There's two different kinds of energy that we can channel. We can channel positive energy, or we can channel not so positive energy. So either everything that we do is building. Everything that we do, every word that we say is building. Every action that we take is building. The question is, what kind of home are we building? Are we building the home for Hashem, or are we building something else? And Parai sees this energy that the Jews have is the energy of building. He sees, you guys, you're creating the world. You're building a world with everything that you do. So what does he do? He says, I'm going to siphon that energy of building out of you and have you direct it towards building my cities, which are not so positive cities. If building a home for God represents humility, if building a home for God represents creating a sense of becoming more translucent toward godly energy, revealing that Hashem is in everything, building a home for Parai is exactly the opposite. Building Parai's pyramids means building a home for ego, for klipa, for something that says, I exist as I am, and denies godliness. And so Parai knows that the Jewish people have this building energy, and he wants to divert it into building something for himself. Because he knows that if he could divert this building energy for himself, he can have something that is so strong. He can have something that is ultimately connected to the ultimate truth, because the Jewish people are connected to the ultimate truth. And if he has this strong building, even though it's strong in the negative direction, it's gonna bolster him up. And this is a common theme that we see in Kabbalah, that the negative forces know what energy something has, and they try to take it and pervert it to be used in a negative direction. Yeah.
Do you think that would be so true of evil forces today, that they have that intuition?
Yeah, I think it's because Hashem sort of allows them to know. It's like the lice. They always know where to go exactly to get they're going to go to places where it's not, okay, if it climbs onto your nostril, you're going to feel it, you're going to swat it away, but they know exactly where to go to be able to sort of get the energy for themselves, and that's definitely the nature of klipa, is that it's the expert energy sucker. Yeah. So just like when we build our building for Hashem, we say that we build it with bricks. And what are those bricks? Those bricks are our actions that we do. So too, Parai wants the Jewish people to build his buildings with bricks. But not only does he want him to build it with bricks, he wants them to create the bricks. And this is where we're going to start to get maybe a little bit more philosophical. Why is it that he wants them to create the bricks themselves and not just use either, you can have ready-made stone from a quarry that you can use and like whittle it down into brick shape. But no, he doesn't want them to use ready-made stone. We're not going to actually, there's a whole long discussion about the advantages of stones over bricks. We're not going to get into it just because it's going to be too much. But he doesn't want them using ready-made stone. He wants them to create the bricks themselves. And so what is up with the bricks? So when we are creating something ourselves, the fact that we are creating something ourselves automatically makes it that it has potential to go in either direction of good or bad. The stone that is ready-made by Hashem, it's created perfect as it is. Versus when I am making a brick, it means that I am involved in the entire process from start to finish, and I am forming what this is going to be. And the fascinating thing is that, like we said before, when we're creating bricks, they go through fire. And it says that once something goes through fire, it completely changes its nature. So there's the potential for something to go in one direction or another direction. And the fire sort of like cements which way it's going to go, right? And once it's gone through the fire, that's what it takes on, like this. It becomes actually like a really firm, like you can't knock down try to kick a building made of bricks, you'll break your toe, right? It's like it becomes from something that's soft, it becomes something real and solid with its own identity. So the identity has potential to go either way. Because it's being man-made, it has a potential to really go either way. Either it can be good or it could be bad, right? It's like, because it's coming from this space of like raw material that I'm making totally on my own, it's like totally open to what it could be. And this is the only way that we can really access the truest, highest, deepest level of godly energy, is when there's potential for something to be either good or bad. When something can only be good, if something can only be good, if something can only be holy, you can't access the essence of God. The only way to access the essence of God is if there is potential in this thing to deny God. And this is where we're gonna push on this point. You can only access the essence of God if there is potential to deny God. Why is that? So there are two different ways that God basically communicates with the world, or not even communicates. There's one way really that God communicates with the world. Hashem communicates with the world through light. Light, is the language of spiritual communication. When we say godly light, what do we mean? Spiritual communication. How Hashem shares with us. So when a miracle happens, that's an example of godly light. When a miracle happens, what happens to the receiver of the miracle? What happens to the person who's witnessing the miracle? The person who's witnessing the miracle all of a sudden is like, oh my gosh, there's a God, right? So it depends on the recipient. I'll say for myself, like, I'm a skeptic, right? So I see these things going around WhatsApp of this person doing that thing, whatever, and I'm like, okay. It needs to be like a really good, very bright miracle for me to buy it. There are other people who are like much more open to seeing Hashem's light than I am, maybe. But if it's really, really revelatory, what happens to cynical me? I have no choice, right? Even if I really don't want to buy that a miracle is happening, I have no choice, because the nature of light is that it overwhelms the recipient. So even if your desire is, I'm not interested in seeing God right now in my life, right? You know, we all go through periods in our life where we're just not interested in seeing Hashem in our life. We're angry, we're annoyed, we're tired, we're frustrated. And so even if Hashem shows up, I'm not gonna open myself up to it, right? I'm gonna refuse to see it. But then there can be a communication from God that becomes so obvious that you cannot deny it. Sometimes you could be in court, let's say, we have the defense and the prosecution. And let's say the defense comes up and new evidence came into play, and they present something to the court, and the prosecution cannot deny the truth of the defense. The prosecution cannot deny the truth of the defense. They say, okay, this is a proof. I can't deny it. I can't deny it. Is the prosecution happy to accept that? No. It's annoying that the other side outshone you, outcommunicated you. It doesn't feel good. But at the same time, it's basically imposed upon the person that this is the truth. So there is levels of revelation of godliness. Like we said, a good example of that would be a miracle that happens. There are certain miracles that happen, or something that happens, that the light just shines so strong that the world cannot deny Hashem. We have these moments where the light shines so strong that even though the world on its own, the vessel, the recipient, doesn't want to accept Hashem, the recipient doesn't want to, because if the recipient accepts Hashem, then what happens to me? I feel like I no longer have my independence and my own say. I want to be able to maintain my independence, so I want to deny God. But the evidence is coming in so strong that there is a Hashem, and I cannot deny it. But at the same time, there's a friction there, because I don't want to, right? It's being imposed. It's a truth that's being imposed. It's a truth, but it's being imposed. And then there's another type of truth. And this is like the truth of a mathematical proof. 2 + 2 is 4. 2 + 2 is 4 is extremely, extremely simple. It doesn't take, there's a reason that a 4-year-old can understand 2 + 2 is 4. Because it's an extremely self-evident, simple truth. It's not a glorious revelation. It just is. And there's no emotion attached to it. No one has an emotional need to deny that 2 + 2 is 4. And no one has an intellectual need to deny that 2 + 2 is 4, right? There's nothing personal attached to it. It's just a self-evident truth that is essentially true, and it just is what it is. So it's not a light that comes in that is so overwhelming that it just blows everyone out of the water. It's just a fact of isness, is that 2 + 2 is 4. The deepest level of creating a home for Hashem, when we talk about that process of what we're doing, of creating a dir b'tach tainim, is not when we impose godly energy upon everything on earth, where there are things that deny Hashem, and I'm just fighting that fight, and I say, no, God is so true, and I'm going to prove it to you, and I'm going to impose it upon you, and the recipient is going to receive it, and that's it. It's when God's essence is just so utterly here, it's like 2 + 2 is 4. It's just a self-evident truth. There's no friction. The recipient completely and totally is able to accept it because it just is. It's beyond intellect. It's beyond emotion. It's not something that I can show. It's a deep, essential identity. That's what it is. It's like this deep, essential identity of truth. That is the highest level of godly revelation that we can have on earth. It's not revelation. That's the point. Revelation sort of knocks everything else away. This is reality. Does this make sense, what I'm saying? Yeah? Okay, so revelation is going to blow something away. This is just the reality of what is. Now, how can we, how do we access this level of bringing Hashem into the world in such a way where he just is the truth of existence? How is that accomplished? So ultimately, what I'm just describing right now, ultimately, when Mashiach comes, what is Mashiach? What is Mashiach? Is that God will be here in this world the way that 2 + 2 is 4 is here in this world. Not a revelation. It's this absolute intuitive identity. Well, it's you know what it is? This is here all along. It's the revelation of this, which doesn't really make sense because this is not meant to be revelation, right? And we're going to get to that in a minute. But so that's what Mashiach really is, and that's why Mashiach is peace. Because as long as there is revelation, that means that there's something that's overwhelming something else, right? One thing is going to be taking over something else. So it's not a peaceful knowledge versus this is the ultimate peaceful knowledge. If you want to, this is like the ultimate what we would call feminine understanding of just like a deep intuitive acceptance of what reality is and knowing it with such a strength and firmness without any fight. It's just like so part of who we are, right? And it says, excuse me, that the Beis HaMikdash was a home for Hashem, right? The Beis HaMikdash was sort of like a taste of what it will be like when Mashiach comes. So in the Beis HaMikdash, it's interesting to note that the Beis HaMikdash specifically was not made out of wood. The Mishkan was made out of wood, which is, and not just wood, the Mishkan was made first out of skins from animals, and then wood, and then the floor was like ground. And that represents the levels of creation, where we have daimim, sameach, chai, medaber. We have inanimate objects, growing objects, chai, living beings, and then human beings. Obviously, we're not making the Mishkan out of human beings, but the other three were utilized in the Mishkan. And that represents the daimim and the daimim and the chai represent revelation because they're in a constant state of growth and moving. The daimim, the inanimate objects, represents the essence, right? The daimim is the absolute receiver, right? It's the earth, it's the vessel. And in the Mishkan, it wasn't the highest levels yet, so therefore we were still in the realm of revelation. It was built with revelation. As opposed to the Beis HaMikdash was built only of stone. That was the only material allowed in the Beis HaMikdash, stone. There were trees, there was some wood used in very specific places, but the majority of the Beis HaMikdash was built out of stone because the point of the Beis HaMikdash is to emphasize the importance of the isness. Not the growing, not the revelation, the being. That here Hashem can just be. And it's specifically in this lowest thing, in this absolute recipient, that we have this isness of just being. But that was only a taste of what it's going to be like when Mashiach comes. That was only a semi-state of it. And what we've been doing throughout Gullus and what we've been doing, our work that we're doing, every time that we're, whether we realize it or not, is that we are drawing Hashem's isness into this world with every brick that we do. We're permeating it with this absolute energy of Hashem himself. And that will be revealed, that final curtain will be lifted when Mashiach comes and we'll see everything that we've done. But, excuse me, back to our bricks and back to our slightly more philosophical conversation. Why is it that we said that they had to make the bricks themselves? It's because we said that if you're making the brick itself, that means it has the potential to either be used for good or to be used for bad. And we said God's essence can only be expressed if there is potential for denial of him. So why is that? Why is it that God's essence can only be expressed if there is potential for denying him? goes back to that question. Can God create a stone that he can't carry? Right? Can God create a stone that he can't carry? And the answer is, yes, he creates a stone that he can't carry, and then he gives it to the Jewish people, the power to carry it. That's where we're going to go, but we're going to explain what this means. What Hashem wants is actually something that is impossible. It says that God desires a dira b'tachteinim, a home for his essence in the lowest place. And that is a paradoxical desire. Because like we said before, it's easy to create a home for revelation. Because revelation is something you can work towards, right? Revelation is something that you could, it's a goal that you could have. You can have a goal to reveal something. You can have a goal for expression. You can't have a goal for essence. It doesn't make sense. The whole nature of essence is that it just is, right? It's like you can't work towards being more essentially aligned. If anything, it's more about negative space, right? If you wanted to be more in tune with who you are, a lot of that becomes, right? A lot of us, we're searching for our identity. We're searching for our deepest inner voice. A lot of the work to do that is more about undoing all the other things that happened before instead of about actively doing something, because the nature of revealing essence is that you can't actively pursue it. So that means that allowing the ultimate expression, Hashem wants the ultimate expression of his essence on earth. That's an impossible, paradoxical task. We're talking about essence. How can we work towards it? How can we enable it? And so the answer to that is that anything that is within the realm of godliness, of holiness, it's true, it can't touch, like, as long as it's coming from that world of revelation, it's not touching the essence. When is it that we're able to actually, what did God do? What was the mechanism that God set up that enables us to access the essence? Is when we are faced with something that denies him. It's only when we're faced with something that denies him that we have that space to activate the essence in an active way. Because where does the power for denial of God come from? The power to deny God comes from Hashem's being, comes from Hashem's essence. The fact is, what is the only true being in this world? What is the only true being that exists? Only God truly, truly exists. Everything else exists only because Hashem is speaking us into creation, right? But why is it that I feel like I exist? I feel like I exist as an independent being. And it's such a fallacy, because if I thought back even for a few minutes, this is one of my favorite meditations to do whenever I need a little humbling or a little tuning into God, is I think about my dependence. I think about all the things I'm dependent on, all the people I'm dependent on. Like, really think about it for a few minutes. It's like super, super humbling. Just how deeply dependent we are. And then think about what my lived experience is. My experience is that I'm this independent being, that I am, that I don't need anyone or anything. And I feel that so strongly, that I am. It's such a strong part of my consciousness. And it's not just me, it's everything around me. The fact that this cup is declaring its existence right now, and when I look at it, I don't see God. I don't see God. That means it's denying God, and it's saying, I am a cup. All of these things, they are expressing identity. They are expressing independent identity. Where do we have this chutzpah and this power to express independent identity from? It's only because the concept of independent identity exists. Where does the concept of independent identity exist in? Truth? Only in Hashem. So it's what we call the yesh hanivra, the created yesh. yesh being that sense of identity, stems from the yesh ha'amiti, stems from the true yesh, the true identity, the truest identity. So it's only the fact that true identity exists within God that enables other things to feel a sense of true identity. And so it's in those things that identify themselves as separate from God and thereby deny God that we have the potential to touch the essence and to access the essence. In something that is revealing itself as being godly, that's in the category of what we would call light, right? Because it's being communicated from Hashem. It's only in the things that have potential to deny God, and then I make a choice. I make the choice to take this brick and put it through the fire. And in that process of putting it through the fire, I'm basically taking it, I'm destroying what it was before, I'm destroying that independent existence that existed before, and I'm revealing the essence of God in this thing. That is the deepest power of Dira B'Tachtonim. That is the deepest power that we have as a Jew. Like we said before, God can't do this, because if God does it, then it's revelation. It's given to the Jew, the power is given to the Jew to take something that says, I am and God is not, and to reveal that God is and this thing only exists because God allows it to. That is the power of brick making and world building that we have as a Jew. And that's us being able to carry that rock, basically, accomplish what we're ultimately supposed to accomplish. So what we said was very complicated, but it's really quite simple. The way this simply plays out is that in every choice, when I meet up with something, when I meet up anything that I am meeting up with in this world that declares itself as I am, I exist. And one of the biggest things that we meet up with in the world that declare themselves as I am, I exist is myself. That's a part of this as well. Anytime I meet up with that essential identity, that proclamation of I am, I have the potential to reveal God's ultimate I. And we're doing this all day. We're constantly interacting with things that declare themselves, with things and with ourselves, that declare themselves as I am. And we're constantly have the power to, am I going to form this into a brick that's going to be used in Pare's pyramid, and thereby keep myself in Mitzrayim? Or am I going to use this power? Am I going to use this brick? Am I going to turn this into a brick that I'm going to use to build God's palace, which is Hashem's home? And that's something, that's the reality of everything that we do. That's what we're facing every day in our lives. And we really, truly, like, we're in this mode, I think, of the concept of rebuilding, right? Our city burnt down and it needs to be rebuilt. And we have the power to direct the energy of the building. Is the energy of the building going to deny God or express God? And not just express God's revelation, express God as he truly is, which is ultimately messianic. So, yeah, every week in Kiddush it says, every week when we're saying Kiddush, when we say Vayichulu Hashemayim ba'aretz v'chal tzavam, the Gemara says that when we say those words, that Hashem culminated creating the world, and Hashem rested. When a Jew says that, they are creating the world again. And it's like something to meditate on, something to think about, is that we are actively partners in the creation of life. We're actively partners. The things that we do are not arbitrary. And they're not small. They feel small, but even the small things that we do, we're actively building something. We're actively creating something. And it's just this little bit of a sense of responsibility and also a sense of empowerment that I do have something. I can do something. Even when I feel like I can't do anything. When the world feels so crazy, I feel like I can't. What can I do? In my life, I am building something. And I'm building something, and I can build something for God. And that will have everlasting impact. So not only should we be able to build, but we should be able to see the results of our building in a very clear and obvious and evident way. Yes, and be able to really leave Mitzrayim ultimately. Sure.